Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Calgary Black Chambers speaker series. I'm your host, John Cornish, president and co-founder of the Calgary Black Chambers. Tonight we have a panel of mayoral candidates. We have Damery, Jyoti Gondek, as well as Teddy Ogbunna. Now, I very much welcome you all for joining us tonight. First things first, I want to recognize that we acknowledge that we are on the territory of the traditional Blackfoot Nation, Siksika, the Piikani, and the Kainai Nations, as well as acknowledge the Beaver people of Tsuut'ina and the Bearspaw, Chiniki, and Wesley bands of the Stoney Nakoda First Nations, the Métis people of the Region 3, and all the Indigenous people who make Treaty 7 region their home. Next up, I would like to invite Brian Lanier to actually set some context, provide us with sort of what we're really trying to learn tonight. So, Brian, you have the mic.
Indigenous, and people of color, BIPOC community with an opportunity to hear directly from the Calgary mayoral candidates and ultimately make an informed choice with their vote. And what we stand for, what we're advocating for, are three things. One is the Calgary Black Chamber is advocating for a strong voice for Black people, the inclusion of Black history in our community, and greater Black representation. Our areas of focus include these four areas. Our focus is on healthcare, education, law and justice, social and economic well-being. So with that said, and now that we have presenced a bit about who we are, we want to give each of the candidates an opportunity for some opening comments and statements. So Jan, can we begin with you, please? Thank you.
Hello, everyone. It's great to see and great to be here. Also want to acknowledge Jyoti and Teddy. It takes boldness and bravery to enter this arena. And I just really welcome, because I believe we're all here to serve the needs of the city of Calgary and how do we actually move us out of the downturn that we've been in. But I'm here because I so passionately believe in this city. It's why I've thrown my hat into the arena. I believe I'm the kind of leader that's positive, experienced, and with me, you're going to get a vision that we can all get behind. You're going to get a bias to action, and I'm promising a high-performing and collaborative city council. I believe that the city has such a great potential, and this is one of the reasons too that I'm throwing my hat in the arena. I have a really varied experience. I've worked in government, I've worked in corporate, I've worked in not-for-profit, both locally and internationally. Calgary has always been my adult home. It has been so generous to me and the opportunity it's afforded me. And so this is about me from a sense of real deep place of gratitude, of paying forward. And I believe that we have every opportunity to make Calgary the place globally that people want to live, work, play, and learn. I believe in a recovery that includes everyone. And I'm hoping we're going to get into more details about that this evening. So I'm very much looking forward to your questions. And I believe that we can be a place that generates jobs and opportunities. And this has gotten very personal for me because my stepson, 24, left this city last August because he did not see opportunity. He could not get a job. And he's gone to the West Coast. And I'm actually not sure at this stage that we're actually going to bring him back. And I worry about what is happening with our young people And particularly when we look about a number of our racialized and marginalized populations in this city, which quite frankly are the fastest growing regions, we have to make sure there is belief in the future of this city and that there is opportunity. And I'm here and throwing my hat in the arena because I fundamentally believe we have all that we need to do that, and we need strong leadership to pull that off.
Thank you.
Thanks again for the opportunity.
Thank you and welcome. And Teddy, please.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me to this great conversation tonight. Originally, as you would see, the media have defined where I come from, originally from Nigeria. I get to be asked every time, even sometimes on the doorstep, hey, where are you from? And I would tell them I'm the only Black guy in Calgary. Just to start from that note, and then we start laughing at it. So I have come from originally from Nigeria. I moved to Toronto, moved to this great city I have called home in 2008. And I do believe that Calgary is the hub of Canadian economy. And I've not been, I couldn't get into any other races except this particular defining moment to make a historic move to make sure that we get to bring back the resilience in terms of socio-economic and environmental values that we share here in Calgary back to this great city. I've always expressed this, that this election is not just about the blues, the oranges, the reds, the independents. It's going to be about diversity, inclusion, and equity. That's going to move us forward to where sustainable path that this city is going to be. I'm a development consultant. I've consulted with major G8 countries in the world at the top level, policy-wise. My expertise is on youth development. I've done a lot of stuff with the United Nations, different arms of the UN, and I'm glad. I did not realize this. Jen had been in Kenya, Nairobi, and we hope to talk more about that later. So I have got lived experience. What I'm offering to Calgarians is not about what I have researched upon, it's about as well my lived experience. I used to be on the street in Lagos of over 26 million people in Nigeria when I was quite young. So I've always been that get-to-go guy, very independent-minded, and I stand on my values and in my integrity. So I can't wait to see Calgary coming back here with lower taxes. There's a lot of waste at the City Hall. We are pretty much bankrupt, and I'm being blunt about it. We don't have any budget. And Councillor Jyoti, sorry, she had asked me to call her Jyoti tonight. She knows about this. So it's going to be all hands on deck, and we cannot achieve our resilient Calgary strategy, which some of them here, Jyoti was in council, still in council when they passed this in 2019. We need to expand more, strengthen this through public-private partnerships to get this city going. And that involves engaging citizens of all races, from First Nations to white settlers to every other person that have come here and called this place home. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Teddy. And Jyoti, please.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the introduction, Brian, and thank you to my fellow candidates that are here tonight. Thanks for inviting us to this. My name is Jyoti Gondek, and I am actually a transplant to Calgary. I moved here in 1997 from Manitoba, and I always say that the city took a chance on me. I was a person with a social sciences background, and Credit Union Central of Alberta said, why don't we give you a job in marketing and see how that works out? And it was fantastic. It allowed me to thrive and do some great work in this city. I also worked for Greyhound Canada, and I decided after that I would take a chance at being an entrepreneur, and I ran my own company called Tick Consulting, as in what makes you tick, for 12 years, and I had the opportunity to work with a lot of energy sector, home building, and land development clients. And during that time, I also volunteered on my very first municipal campaign. And I learned that I had a great love for city building. And I spent 10 years from 2007 to 2017 volunteering in community-based organizations, building community capacity, serving for 4 years as a Calgary Planning Commission member, and gaining an education in urban sociology so that I could do my best to build this city to its full potential. And in 2017, I sat back and thought, I've done a lot of work from the edges and tried to influence change. Maybe it's time to seek a seat at the table. And that's when I ran in the election. And with the confidence of Ward 3 voters behind me, I was elected in 2017. I've spent 4 years working with members of my community to achieve some really good stuff for our community. And in December of this past year, I felt I had another term to offer to a city that has given me so much. And what I wish to do in a leadership position is really build a great team so that we can have a strong, progressive future for our city that includes everyone, that makes everyone feel like they're welcome here. And that's how you find me before you today. Thanks.
Thank you, Jyoti. And back over to you, John.
And thank you very much, Brian. As we've heard, a wonderful introduction. So how about we just hop right into the questions? And it was actually nice because a lot of you actually touched on the subjects that we'll be talking about tonight. So, who's up first? Let's roll the dice, and I think Jan is up first. So, Jan, Teddy, and Jyoti, you all have 2 minutes to answer the following question. Now, what steps will you take to ensure that we have a thriving Calgary for everyone who's here? Jan?
And that we include everybody when we're in relationship with people. And so as we sort of build the recovery, wanting to make sure and understand some of the barriers that people are facing, nothing drives me crazier than underemployed and underemployed people. And so this is about really building relationships, strong relationships with both business, government, and that we're working collaboratively to create opportunities. And I'm seeding some very specific policies to ensure and ideas that will actually attract talent and create opportunities for all Calgarians. This is about looking at all sectors. I've been very involved in the tech sector the last 4 years. I've been coaching and facilitating startup CEOs and have a firm belief in that there is just power in diversity. And part of it is always when we look, and part of my coaching is looking at do we have everyone represented and our voices actually feeling safe and heard? So that's how I address that question.
Thanks, Jen. Now, I guess we'll go with we'll just follow Brian's little order here. So Teddy, same question to you. How are you going to make a thriving Calgary that's inclusive of all residents?
I'm a very firm believer in nothing substitutes teamwork and partnership. And you, as a professional back in the days, Hall of Fame in football, you know that you wouldn't have done your runs alone. So a lot of people are feeling well left behind in this city. I do believe that the current council divided this city racially and economically, and I have my facts for that. I do believe they were not inclusive. I do believe that a lot of folks were left behind. So my take on that is to engage Calgarians of all races and even the faith-based communities to have a voice at the city hall. And huge on my platform is to make sure that the young folks, the millennials, like Jen's son that have gone to the West Coast, we want to see if they can come back here when we begin to create more a vibrant community that will create that enabling environment for the young folks to know that this city belongs to them, not you and I, that they are the foundation of this city. So if you look at the municipal data census of 2029-20, we lost about 5.5% of these folks. And putting this into context, you know that poverty rates in this great city, there was an addition of 77,000 poverty to what we used to have. And then, so we're looking at about 40% increase. People have gone below the poverty line. And that's not good. Wait a minute here. We are not going to blame this only on pandemic. This has started before the pandemic. We got to be very truthful about this whole narrative. So my engagement is to engage people and focusing more as well on senior citizens and the young folks out there to make sure that instituting that shadow cabinet I want to do on my platform, I want to institute a shadow cabinet. First time in history of this great city, to institute a shadow cabinet where young folks would have a voice. And students who participate in that will get credit for participating as an extracurricular activity. So engagement to my platform, to my vision for Calgary, and to make sure we have a sustainable city in all ramifications of development is my goal here. So engaging everyone, no one is going to be left behind. In our conversations in council, engaging the aldermen or city councillors, I do believe that partnering with the public, civic engagement, and public-private is the way to go to make sure that we get our economy back on track, and no one is going to be left behind.
Beautiful. Hey, thank you so much for that, Teddy. And the same question for you now, Jyoti. We have, what steps will you take to ensure that we have a thriving Calgary for everyone who's here?
Thanks very much for the question, John. From an economic perspective, I think Council is on the right track right now with the downtown strategy that we just approved. It has sent a signal in the market that Calgary is interested in investing in itself. We are looking at how to repurpose a lot of the spaces that are vacant downtown right now and make them adaptable for housing and new types of business ventures. And what we have heard today is that there's at least 30 companies that are very interested in taking advantage of the incentive program that we have offered through that funding model. So I have great faith that we engaged with many different stakeholder groups and created a strategy that will help us recover really well. From a social perspective, I think it's going to be critical to make sure that we keep the lines of communication open with our social service providers and organizations that are working with people in positions of vulnerability. We're going to need to make sure that our homeless strategies, our harm reduction strategies, the things that we can't control locally are things that we do in partnership with the federal and provincial governments, because ensuring that you have a strong society with a population that is well supported for all of its needs, whether they be healthcare or housing or income supplements. When you have strong citizens, they're able to participate in the labor force, and we need to make sure that we're offering those opportunities in our city by collaborating with the private sector, social services groups, and the other two orders of government. And to be as inclusive as possible, we have to make sure that we are involving folks with lived experiences that are different than the people who are in elected office. And we need to make sure that we are normalizing the idea of people who are previously marginalized to be in leadership positions. We have to intentionally seek out leaders who represent diverse populations.
Oh, wonderful answers from everyone. Very much thank you for that. Tonight was a night about, sort of inclusivity, as Brian laid out, and, hearing just your thoughts there, I think we're on the right track already. Now we heard a little bit of a reference to it, including a lot of different parties. So let's ask another question along those lines. How will you be a collaborative leader when it comes to different industry, nonprofit, and other groups in Calgary? We've seen a lot of division in our city. How will you be a uniter? This question is, let's go Jyoti. You're already on screen. Let's go Jyoti.
Thanks very much, John. I think the idea of developing a cadence for regular meetings with the different groups that we have to work with is going to be incredibly important. And I think probably critical for Council will be to create a strong team to execute on the plans that we have. It tends to be that the workload is shifted over to the mayor's office on a regular basis because that's our chief elected official. I think if the mayor was able to work with those folks on council that have put up their hand for leadership positions, those being the chairs of the standing policy committees, you would then have a group of 5 or 6 individuals who could pull the workload together. They could leverage their skills and they could leverage their relationships with other orders of government, with the social services sector, and with industry sectors. So I think if we're able to be more collaborative as a council and really tackle things in a way that spreads the work amongst council members, we'll get much farther. And that's something that I would want to put into place as quickly as possible.
Very nice. Very nice. Yeah. And so let's go on to Teddy. How will you be a collaborative leader with different industry, nonprofit, and other groups in Calgary?
My experience in life for about 20-something years, I've always been a collaborative leader with European Union, the G8 on the side events in the UN in Manhattan. Locally here, I'm the only candidate that's been proud to be a conservative. Some of them are conservatives, but I do regard them as being neoliberals. They don't stand on our progressive conservative values that we do here in Calgary. And I'm proud to be one. I don't shy away from my party, in as much as I'm not really a happy camper at the moment. So my goal here is to engage citizens, and engaging them is not just city council. We are just more like a mouthpiece. the bulk of the negotiations and the conversations comes from your ridings, from your wards, from your constituencies, and to engage them. Well, I have got a problem with the city of Calgary, the way the public engagement is done a week, 2 weeks. Sometimes, politicians do this and they fast track it because they don't want really everyone to have a voice in it. That is where I'm going to bridge that gap. I really want everyone to have a voice on things that is happening in the city of Calgary. And that's what I believe democracy is all about. Open government, transparency, and accountability. And for me, I heard Jyoti mention a lot of committees leveraging on their skill sets. It goes beyond that. We need to coordinate and decentralize a little bit of what the mayor's office needs to do, and even the commissions or the committees themselves, and push that back to civil societies and not-for-profit sectors. And sometimes in some other cities I've been, even in the US, most policies you see that comes out, environmental policies, for instance, in California, some of them have come out from the not-for-profit organizations, environmental groups, pushing and making a case, business case for the city that this is the way to go. And the council will vote on that. So I don't see anything wrong in, for instance, the LGBTQ2 community as a group, and the environmental groups, faith-based groups coming in and making a case for what they think about this, and then council will vote on it. So for me, it's all about engaging not-for-profit sectors, public and private, everyone. No one is going to be left behind, and I keep saying this. But most especially engagement with the young people. They're going to have a voice in the decision-making process at the City Hall under my administration. Thank you.
Beautiful. And, last but not least, Jan, how will you be a collaborative leader with a different industry, nonprofit, and other groups in Calgary?
You're on mute, Jan.
The most common saying of the last years.
Double click, right? Sorry about that. Anyway, thanks for the question. Also, thank you for repeating it, John. It's something I think this demonstrated ability to collaborate across all sectors. It's actually something that I actually bring to the table. I've been an executive in government, in not-for-profit sector, in the business community, and also have run my own business. And so I have both relationships in all these sectors, and I can actually pull across. And I'm the type of leader that's known to actually get the best out of people and to really seek out diverse voices to ensure when we're dealing with the complex issues that we are doing, that we're actually drawing on that diversity and those perspectives. And how do you get the best, and how do you actually bring people on side to a common vision? So this is the spirit and the nature of the leadership that I'm going to bring to City Council as mayor. I have a saying, value, one big brain, which really reflects the diversity of those views and opinions. And it truly takes a village when I think, again, how do we engage? And I'm hearing, a riff off Teddy here as well, because as I'm talking with citizens, I'm hearing that we're not doing enough at the city, meaningful engagement. People actually are not feeling heard. And so we've got to look at the mechanisms that we're listening, and also, are we prepared to change our plans given what we are hearing to engage everyone? And this is a bit of a secret sauce, again, that I bring to the table, whether it was at YWCA, building the new hub structure, getting community on side, and also getting donors on side in supporting our most vulnerable in our city, where I've done it in building large infrastructure projects with the oil, the pipeline industry, very complex stakeholder relationships. This is my specialty. So that's how I am. I'm just, the nature of my leadership as well is very much leading from behind and servant leadership.
Very much appreciate that, Jen. So, and Jyoti, Teddy, Jen, all your answers were exactly what we're looking to hear. Somebody that is actually a uniter rather than a divider. So, Jen, we're going to come back to you with our next question. Now, this is a little bit more what you can do through city council and in your role as mayor. How will you support the promotion of equity through the deliberate inclusion of underemployed Calgarians at both a policy level and an incentive level?
Yeah, I think the role of mayor is a real signal booster, and part of it is highlighting. So this is very much on my radar screen, and how we look at both practices, the kinds of questions we answer. Do we have all the perspectives at the table, and making sure that we are inclusive in that way. And I think a lot of people get confused too about equality and equity. And having worked in the world of not-for-profit for a lot of my career in the last number of years, serving this great community, have started to really appreciate the intersectional nature of barriers that many of our citizens face. And so for me, it's about actually really removing barriers. To me, I think that's one of the crux of leadership, is to remove barriers, listen intently to understand what those barriers are, and how do we also empower people, right, to ensure that they actually have a voice, that they're seen, they're heard. I am really concerned what's coming out of post-COVID, and I call it sort of the shadow pandemic, where people are feeling very fragile, dealing with stresses and mental health issues. I think this is something that's actually going to unite many of us, and an appreciation, the empathy that we have for many of our citizens in this city. And so it's also making sure we've got the kind of resources and understanding that people know where to go in partnership with all of our sector partners and bringing that to the table. So, and that is ensuring, again, that people are getting what they need, and that we're giving them the opportunity to thrive and build their dreams.
Wonderful, wonderful. Yeah, I like you separating. There's a difference between equality and equity. So let's go, Teddy. How will you support the promotion of equity through the deliberate inclusion of underemployed Calgarians at both a policy and incentive level?
Jen pretty much, describe the definitions and the two in context. For me, equity is just the hallmark of development. And if you want to get people along and get them to participate, we've got to create that enabling environment for them to air their voice, make sure their voices are heard, and it is very important. So I do believe as a mayor, I'm going to have a more listening ear to Calgarians, and based on what Calgarians need, and especially the unemployed. We have touched about so many things here, addiction. We have talked about even pay equity. You may be surprised that even today in the city of Calgary, some folks in some departments are not paid exactly what other folks are earning in some other departments. I have researched this, and I'll give you an instance. I mean, the police force, for instance, and the Calgary police. Jyoti will attest to this. Some of them, when they work during the weekends and working off their, doing their time boots on the ground, they don't get to be paid like other ones in the city when they work weekends. Not the same. They don't get the double pay, as you would want to call it. I've talked to a lot of police officers. I had this chat with the previous police chief sometime, and I've not seen it change unless it changed tomorrow. Last I recall, they still have that problem. And because it's a union environment, and some of the young boys on boots ground, we don't have much voice. But we need to change the way we do things, make sure this equity is across board. Thank you.
Awesome, Teddy. So, and then let's go, Jyoti. We'll be switching up the. I just got to refresh myself. The order of this after this last question. So, Jyoti, the question is, how will you support the promotion of equity through deliberate inclusion of underemployed Calgarians at both a policy and incentive level?
Thanks for the question, John. One of the things that we were able to do on council in this term that I've served on is introduce the idea of equity-based procurement policy. So in the past, we had a procurement policy that was largely focused on dollar value. And what we've done is asked administration to implement a different lens to make sure that we are doing procurement and working with partners who are actually offering the types of benefits and wages to their employee that allow them to have good quality of life. We are looking for organizations that are actively interested in doing equity, diversity, and inclusion work. So we're making sure that our partners have the same type of commitment that we do to inclusion. So that's the policy angle of it. In terms of helping people that are underemployed, I think we need to retain our commitment to reskilling the workforce. And to do that, I think we need to work very closely with Calgary Economic Development as well as some of our post-secondaries who are doing that work. We need to identify who's interested in making that type of a career change and then offer them the opportunities. And then from a very pragmatic perspective, people need to be able to get to these opportunities. They need to be able to get to positions of employment or reskilling or whatever it may be. And we need to make sure that we've got strong transit networks in place for them to access those places. We also need to make sure that we've got housing available to people if part of their underemployment is linked to not having access to some of those basic essentials. So I think it's a combination of having the policies in place for our partners, but also to look at the services that Calgary provides to make sure that there's equitable access to employment in this city.
And another wonderful answer. So we are going to switch it up now. We're going to have Teddy now go first, followed by Jyoti and then Jan. Again, I'm hearing all these great answers, and just in recognize how little time we have. I just want to just take a second just to thank you all for attending again. It's been a wonderful evening, even thus far. So the next question then, I think would then go to Teddy, who is now being asked. Teddy, how will you help the city implement equity requirements for city-funded organizations to ensure equity-deserving groups are represented?
I do. Thank you so much, John. I do believe that we still have to strengthen our resilient Calgary strategy, which the council passed. I think it was June 2019. I wasn't. When I attended I've always attended combined council meeting. I do see a lot of flaws in that, and this is prior to pandemic. So I strongly believe that we need to strengthen partnerships, look at the areas we need to strengthen more in engaging people, and to make sure we have a more resilient Calgary. The strategy needs to be not just on the environment, but economic resilience, environmental, social, and all that. Making sure we have the shocks to absorb anything in the near future. When they had that in 2019, and looking at what is going on right now, everyone got so confused and inconsistent messages from the city. And in all, this boils down to municipal government, and we cannot do that alone. So my take is to make sure we have a more respectful conversations with the provincial government. It's going to be a multi-relationship building with provincial government, whoever is there, and of course the federal government, to make sure we have the kind of investments we need in this great city going forward. I've heard a lot of stuff from Jyoti and being in council, what they have introduced, and I'm asking myself, why haven't they done this in the last 10, when she came in, I think she came in just maybe 5-7 years ago, but the current mayor came in 2010. So all the stuff they are doing now on everything to promote inclusion, equity, on equity policies and all whatnot, still boils down to how we're going to make sure we strengthen the Resilient Calgary Strategy Act that we do currently have. We need to push, it is a very strong push for me. And how do we fill those gaps, the flaws we have in the history engagement and of all citizens? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Teddy. And like tonight's not a debate. People, however you feel about it, let's just try to stay on our own personal messages. So we had Jyoti, we had from Teddy. Let's go to Jan, if you wouldn't mind sharing about your thoughts on how the city will implement equity requirements for city-funded organizations to ensure equity-deserving groups are represented.
I click and then it unclicks. You think after 18 months I would have figured this out. Crazy. I'm a believer in the power of questions, particularly in process. And so part of it is when we look at sort of our city-funded organizations, are we asking the question of what their equity policies are? It becomes very much sort of a criteria to this funding. We also have to know where the gaps are and how are we falling short. I know that Calgary Arts Development, for example, right now is in the measuring stage. They're actually looking at this. And so we need to ensure that all of our partners and funding partners are delivering their grants and are undertaking this similar work. It's just beyond sort of kind of talking about it now. It's actually who is doing it and how do we also get away and remove the barriers to people actually following this through. And I was doing some similar work at YWCA. So this is a field that I'm incredibly familiar with and incredibly passionate about, as you're probably getting. Because we're leaving off.
Yeah, well, you definitely pick up your enthusiasm there, Jan. Now, Jyoti, this is your question now. How will the city implement equity requirements for city-funded organizations to ensure that equity-deserving groups are represented?
Thanks very much for the question, John. I think one of the biggest things about equity is the way people interpret it. And I think as someone with lived experience of knowing that, I represent, I guess what you could call a marginalized group or a couple, I can see how some of the policies were holding us back from actually having good representation on our wholly owned subsidiaries or our commissions and our boards and on council. So the thing that we've been able to do is make sure that we're defining what equity means and how do you go about actually making that happen. So I can give you an example. I also serve on the CMLC board as a member of council. And when we went to do a search for directors, I was able to ask the question of our recruitment firm, how are you going to cast your net wider? What practices will you use to ensure that you're reaching out to the types of groups who will give you good qualified candidates that you ordinarily might not get through your channels? Are you engaging with, groups like yours, with Calgary Black Chambers? Are you engaging with the Federation of Asian Canadian Lawyers? There's all these groups out there that sometimes the mainstream recruitment firms don't know about. So that was a challenge, but I also understand that there are partner organizations and wholly owned subsidiaries that are doing much better at this than the city of Calgary as a corporation. So I think it's important for us to learn from our partners what type of equity measures they're taking and then implement them ourselves. We can't always think that the city has the best answers. We've got to stop and listen to our partners. And I mean that across the board as well. There are social service organizations and private sector groups that are doing better at this than we are, and we need to start deploying those methodologies within the city as well.
No, it's everybody's responses are always so good, and we're actually arriving at the last of the questions that we'll be asking. If you want to submit a question, you can go ahead and submit it. It'll just go directly to Akwazi, and then he'll let you know when it's your time to ask it, where you can ask it personally. So the last question that we have, and we'll go again. Let's have Jyoti go first this time, and we will have a question about. Yeah, this is a pretty direct question. How will you as mayor support the Black community?
Thank you for the question. I think as the mayor, I would support the Black community in the same way that I've been supporting the Black community as I've been a councillor, by making sure that I understand what your needs are, what your perspectives are, where we have let you down, where we have more work to do. I think understanding the needs of the Black community is first and foremost. So I have spent quite some time trying to understand how the Black community has been treated and what we need to do to make that better. I've had the opportunity to interact with different people in different positions on Calgary Police Commission. I have had the incredible opportunity of speaking with folks who have given me a whole different understanding of how policing should be because of their lived experiences. Same thing in planning and urban development. We've got to make sure that we're building communities that are welcoming and inclusive. And sometimes when we do it according to a mainstream perspective, we're not getting it right. And so I need to understand what it is that the Black community needs from council and be able to provide it to you. And I mean, I guess the best thing that we can do is make sure that we are, I keep saying this, we need to have a cadence of meetings. We need to make sure that we are setting regular times to speak with you as an organization to understand how we're performing in terms of what you need and what we've delivered on. So open communication is absolutely the way that we need to do this.
Yeah, I certainly agree. Open communication is definitely the way we move forward. So let's go on to Jan. The same question to you. How will you as mayor support the Black community?
Thanks, John. And it's intently listening to what is needed in that support, and particularly as I sit here, right, as a white privileged woman, I very much am cognizant of that position. And I've learned the need to create space, create opportunity, and listen intently. And how do we reach out broadly so that people are being heard? I have worked closely with a number of people in my own organization that I'm on a leave of absence with YWCA. And there's also a crisis in leadership, ensuring too that we're actually encouraging members of the Black community really be in leadership roles. and how are we understanding what is getting in their way in terms of promoting them to those roles. So for me, you can actually see a huge ally, and how do we just create the space for that to happen. So thanks for that.
Thank you, Jen. And, Teddy, last but not least, we have the same question to you. How will you, as mayor, support the Black community?
And this is interesting. I'm Black. So Jyoti's mentioned that she represents the marginalized. Just point of correction, Jyoti, you and I represent the marginalized, not just you. And as well, Jen, privileged white lady, as she said. But here is my take. We are all privileged to be here in this great country and city, Calgary. From white settlers, First Nations, white settlers, to everyone, we are all byproducts of immigration, period. And I'm blunt about it. I tell my friends, what I'm looking into is to give listening ears, not just the Black community. My Black community, we have got our work cut out for us. We need to have a sustained dialogue with engaging people and speak up. So is the white community. On the doors, I'm hearing some of them are telling me, hey, we are now the minority here in Calgary. There's this growing thing, resentments going on online, and don't take it for granted. So the brown community in the Northeast where I live, we will have problems. If you look at the statistics of, for instance, police, there's bias in the system. There's no doubt. You look at the Northeast here, how many stops that goes on, is more within the brown community than the Black community here in Northeast. So I will support the Black community. I will support the brown community, the white community, every community, Asian community that is have their own issues and concerns. We shall all support each and every one of us. And that is the way to go in this city.
Beautiful. We are a organization, apolitical. But, at the end of the day, we are trying to make things better in the city for all BIPOC people. And all people, really. I think we are sort of at the point where, we've prepared you with 20 questions. We picked 5 of those questions. And now it's time to go into the water a little bit. Let's go a little bit deeper. Akwazi, maybe you could call on our first question asker.
Campbell, would you need to ask your question?
Thank you so much. So to Teddy and Jyoti and Jan, from a tax breakdown perspective, in Calgary, police services make up 21% of the property tax spend. What are your thoughts on defunding the police and reallocating a portion of those tax dollars to alternative service response models? For awareness, an alternative service response model is a new approach to reducing reliance on traditional law enforcement and medical 911 responses, and creating more equitable outcomes for communities of color, Indigenous communities, and others who are disproportionately impacted by the criminal justice system and traditionally over-policed.
That was a complex question. Thank you very much, Heather. So let's simplify the question a little bit. Maybe, Heather, you're comfortable with 21% of tax spent on police forces. How would you do anything different with that existing spend? Let's go to Jyoti first.
Thank you very much, John and Heather. I appreciate your question. I've actually lived through this debate, and I can tell you that in the 2020 budget cycle, Calgary Police Commission, together with the Calgary Police Service, came forward with a budget that tried to accomplish that, and it was a start. And council, instead of understanding that this was a very strong signal being sent from commission that they were interested in alternative response models, council decided to get into a debate about defund versus defend. And it was probably one of the most shameful debates that I've been involved in. It resulted in a member of council saying that anyone who supports Black Lives Matter is an extremist. And I had to challenge that in chambers. It's embarrassing that we went down that line. I think anytime a police service and an oversight body like commission comes forward with a budget that says we would like to offer this money towards joint programming that better serves Calgarians, we should be taking that seriously. And instead of getting into rhetorical debates about defunding versus defending, we should have realized that the dollars on the table were going to help people in positions of vulnerability. And so I commend Commission for pushing the police service to go down that road. I think Deputy Chief McClellan is committed to this, and she has demonstrated a willingness to look at their budget and understand how it can be allocated towards alternative response models, very much like the CAHOOTS model that works well in Oregon, I think. Houston also has some really good programming. So I know that Commission and the service have been looking at those models that work in other jurisdictions. And so I would like City Council to trust the oversight body that we put in place that's actually making moves towards that.
Very nice. You know, I think it was a great point raised where you had, you know, city councilor say that, you know, Black Lives Matter is an extremist organization, and this is just how it goes for Black people. We try to get something done, and you know, there's people on the other side of it just trying to preserve the way it is. So Jan, the same question to you. 21% of the property tax spend is on police. How would you do things differently?
For the question, Heather. I think it's so important. I was one of those alternative response models working with YWCA with actually the domestic conflict resolution teams. And so even working with some of the police staff working on that team and realize that we need the right kind of expertise that are intervening in some of these very challenging situations that are not justice or crime related. So for me, I'm very much about exploring and very much take Jody's point about we've got to look at these alternatives that gets the right skill addressing the right issue, and how do we also remove the bias that is in a lot of this system. I think this speaks to an earlier, you know, a conversation we had this evening about really partnering with the expertise that exists in our not-for-profit sector. We've got many avenues to do that, particularly in the mental health area. So for me, it's about reallocating funds for the most impact and for the greatest impact that also helps our citizens, and that's all citizens.
Thank you very much for that, Jen. And so Leslie, so Jyoti has to go pretty quick here. I just want to let you know, one more question for Jyoti, and then so we'll just get Teddy. You know, 21% of the property tax spend is on police, and you know, as mayor, how would you change things up?
Thank you so much, John. The vision of my campaign is really to cut taxes across board and 10% fixed for 4 years. So if that is going to happen, it's going to affect the Calgary police. And one thing I'm not going to do, I'm not going to use the word defund the police. I will not defund them. But I don't believe that this city is a police city. I've spoken my mind to so many top-ranking police officers. I had a meeting with few people yesterday. And I told them, and they asked me, they needed a straight answer. And I told them, if I'm going to cut city employees and propose to cut city employees and salaries and making sure we get things on, you know, right, it's going to affect the police hiring, because every class of police college costs city payers so much money. Check it out. The numbers are way too much that I want to mention here. But so we need to call down on hiring. Of course, at the city, there are city employees. It's going to affect them. While providing resources and support them on what they need to do in terms of public safety. We need a police here. But there are, on the other, I mean, flipping the coin here, the police have a lot of way to go in terms of community relations with people of minority. We need to have a sustained dialogue with them, and that could go into part of their training component on how to deal with people of minority. There are cultural differences, despite that we're all citizens here, and they need to understand that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Teddy. Jyoti, with respect to your time, we're going to give you one more question. We're going to go with Teddy starting off the next group of questions, and then Jyoti, and then Jan. Quasi, who do we have up to ask the next question?
Next up is Habiba.
You get to ask it yourself, Habiba.
Turns out I was on mute. I apologize. Okay. My question, first of all, it's so nice to like sit down and like hear what all the candidates are saying. I'm learning a lot. My question is basically about the opioid epidemic. We are currently in the middle of one. And I just wanted to kind of understand what your plans are to battle the drug poisoning crisis, and if safe consumption sites are included or not included in your plans.
Okay, thank you very much, Habiba. Now, let's go with, we said Teddy was going to go first. Teddy, what are you going to do about the opioid epidemic that we are facing here in Calgary?
Thanks. Great question, Ms. Abiba. I just want to be clear on this addiction, opioid, mental health. Most of these things, homelessness that we deal with here in Calgary, it is not just a municipal issue. There is a provincial perspective and federal perspective to it. So my goal is to form that multi-level partnership with provincial government and with the federal government to see where we are. The statistics, the numbers are all there. It's not going any better. So, and it's probably going to get worse with this whole pandemic. People want to get involved into it. And mental health is going to be something huge conversation to be having every day from every family, homes here back. So we need to make sure we have that the resources, the capacity to be able to handle this, and that can only work out, to our goal when we engage, make sure that the provincial government and the federal government are involved in this whole thing, because they're all two different things. Could look interconnected, but they're all different things to deal with. And is at the bottom of is on my platform to advocate for such things. And that's the way to go, I do feel. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Teddy. And, we have Jyoti answering the same thing. What steps would you take to address the opioid pandemic that Calgary is going through?
Habiba, thank you for a great question. I hope that the pandemic has taught us that any one of us could fall into a position of vulnerability. Any one of us could be impacted by a crisis in our life or some sort of traumatic event that could put us or a family member in that same position of desperation and potentially this situation where you use drugs. And I think if you understand that, an addict is not a type of person, an addiction can happen anywhere at any time, depending on the crisis or trauma that somebody is dealing with. I think it humanizes the issue. And I think what we need to do is understand that harm reduction is absolutely something we should be practicing. It saves lives. We can no longer say that, these people chose to be addicts and it's okay if they die. It's not. It is not okay when members of our city die from an overdose. So harm reduction is critical. The safe consumption site does need to remain. It is a place where we make sure that our fellow Calgarians are not dying. And it's also an opportunity for someone that chooses at that particular moment in time that they don't wish to use anymore. They can turn to someone and say, I need some help. But the problem is we've created an environment where we don't have that additional support. So I think the issue with harm reduction, the way we're practicing it right now, is just to offer that safe consumption site with not enough programming that goes along with it. So if we're going to get this right and we're going to do this well, we're going to need to invest more dollars in making sure that harm reduction is complete, that it's not just a safe consumption site, it also has the ancillary services and supports that go along with it. We need to advocate for our population to the provincial government to boost the spending in this area.
Very well said. It's something I'm gonna build this building and they'll be fine. That's going to take care of the problem. It's not that simple. And thank you for touching on that, Jyoti. And then Jan, same question to you as mayor. How will you address the opioid crisis?
Abiba, thanks too for the question. And I've worked in trauma-informed practices really for the last 5 years with YWCA. And so it probably is not surprising to you that I am also pro harm reduction and very supportive of safe injection sites. Where we have misstepped, and this is what I would do as mayor, is to ensure we've got strong partnerships with our local community agencies that actually are experts providing the services. And this is actually what is the failing on some of those sites that have been closed right now, is that we didn't actually have the community supports to actually support, also to support the neighborhood in terms of ensuring, how these centers were placed in these areas, and that, to Jyothi's point as well, that people actually had the supports as they were sort of transitioning. Addiction is about coping. And I think that's something just more generally we have to understand as a population. We can't blame people. We can't say that there's something wrong. So this is about pain and trauma. And I think particularly as we come out of this pandemic, we've got to have this compassion and empathy and ensure that we actually are funding the support services that are required for this, because actually the population is going to be expanding. And so very much on my radar screen. And because of the strong relationships I have in the sector, is how do we bridge these collaborative partnerships to really have positive outcomes? Because I agree with all my colleagues as well. One death is not tolerable in this situation.
Yeah, I very much appreciate all of your points. It's such a touchy subject, and it's almost one that flies under the radar. But it's an epidemic that's, it's killed more people than COVID in Canada. So, unfortunately for that. So Jyoti, I want to just give you an opportunity to say some closing remarks. We're going to try and keep Jan and Teddy for a few more minutes. But Jyoti, if you want to say anything to close out your portion of the presentation.
John, and forgive me everyone if I didn't have something previously booked. I would have loved to stay longer, but please reach out if you have more questions. I'd be happy to answer them. I'm always willing to engage in conversation. I want to thank my two fellow candidates for coming out today. I think we've given each other a lot to think about, and I want to thank everybody on this call for asking some really good and diverse questions. You've asked us about funding and financing. You've asked us about social issues. And I hope that when you are choosing someone who will lead this city, that you look for someone who's got the experience and the passion to get the job done, and someone who's willing to lead with humility so that we can work better as a team in every sector and really get Calgary to its full potential. So thank you so much for your time this evening. I wish you all well. Take care.
Thank you very much, Jyoti. And good luck in your campaign as well. Now I want to directly call on the chair of our advocacy committee. Maybe he's thought of some kind of question here. Warren, the floor is yours.
Evening all, and evening Jan and Teddy. I did have a question, although Heather sort of kind of touched on it with regards to the police. Her question was pretty extensive and comprehensive. My question really in sort of a broader perspective had to do more with your thoughts on just police reform in general. And so it's kind of back to that subject because clearly over the pandemic, we've seen kind of a spotlight put on police service, specifically in the US, but kind of across the board, even throughout Canada. Calgary has kind of operated below the radar with regards to any kind of big issue. However, that being said, there probably still is a lot of room for change. So I just kind of wanted to get your thoughts on reform in the police system.
So let's go with Teddy. You can answer first. What are your thoughts on police reform?
Well, good question. I do believe we're going to have a very huge conversation with the police commission and the police chiefs as well. I mean, the whole top management there. We have a problem here. The problem is that people have painted the police really, really bad. And in my own opinion, we still have very good police officers sacrificing their lives and everything to protect us, our communities. And we need to keep to that and trust them. And they need to get trust back mostly in the communities of what they call high-risk communities or people of color. There has been so many things going on. There are tiny bad apples in the police force. And my goal is to see that as part of the reform from anti-racism thing they have set up, which I put it on my social media, and I wasn't, my own take is that it was a PRO exercise. We know policies and procedures that are bad, and we know where they have come from, and we need to start from there, the bias in those texts to begin to change from there, and not just making it loud and setting up anti-commissions. We have human rights commissions here, we have labor, we have everything here for you to go into, but the enforcement has always been a problem. So my goal is to make sure that police, for instance, all police officers in Calgary would have a body cam. I don't know how many of you that talk to police, but some of them do have body cam. They have body cam, but most of them don't put it on. That body cam is very protective of the officer and the Calgarian they are talking to. And that's the starter for me. And then the reforms will go into community relations. But I'm pushing forward to see where the police will begin to balance traditional and community policing in what they do. They deserve respect. they as well need to have respect. I've had an experience with the police myself, and I don't put it in as just a racial guy. I was in a wrong place. I mean, I was at the wrong time at the wrong place, in a place at the wrong time. They're looking for someone they thought is me, but just because I'm black, I didn't want to bring it up. But I told them, but there were other SUVs around there. Why is it just me? You know, but they apologized and they let go. And at the end, we had a nice conversation. And then I went back to the police headquarters the following day just to document, to make sure my name is not in the system. And they said that they couldn't find anything. But I do think that, you know, people of minority, the minority group, we as well need to have a dialogue from community leaders and to faith-based communities to engage the police commission on our concerns and begin to go from there.
Thank you very much, Teddy. And so, Jan, you know, as mayor, how would you deal with the police and potential reformation?
For me, it comes down to also culture and really acknowledging there is systemic racism, and people behave within the system. And so the system has to change. And I know there's been lots of false starts. And so part of it is how do you empower, right? Both the police commission and also the leadership. And do we also have the right leadership that can also drive a culture? Because it's about intentional shifts and changes. It's about accountability. It's about understanding all of our own sort of unconscious biases, that we come to terms with this. And I think there's been a real reckoning in the last number of months, particularly heightened with everybody sort of in this threat state with COVID. So it's about really acknowledging and listening very intently to the community and those populations being marginalized. And the stats are still not favorable in the incidents that we are seeing. And there's also about getting back to the root causes. So I definitely lean also towards restorative justice, sort of philosophy in many of these things. When we look at how do we look at the conditions and why are people behaving, and how do we support them to make the choices that they need to actually reach their potential and not get caught up in this system. So it's also about root causes, which comes back to, you know, poverty, lack of opportunity, isolation. And this is something that I so believe that we can become a far more connected and resilient city by actually embracing and creating opportunity for all. But we have to really come to terms with the barriers facing all. So this becomes cultural for police, same thing, part of the bigger system.
Very well said, Jen. And Teddy, I definitely, I'm sure there's a lot of people, actually, I know there's a lot of people in this chat who have had similar experiences to yours where, hey, you're just minding your own business and all of a sudden you're the bad guy. You know. Yeah, you know, not everybody's lucky enough to get into the paper about those kinds of things too. So let's Quasi, who do you have available for us?
Fogo, and then on deck is Kenny.
Beautiful. Cheryl.
Thank you, Quasi, and thank you, John, for setting this up, and to the candidates for your for being willing to come and chat with us. When it comes to equity, it's very difficult to move forward into a positive future if we don't know who we've been in the past. And in my experience, most Calgarians are not educated about our long, rich Black history in the city. As mayor, what would you do to ensure City Council raises its own awareness of Black history and the contributions of Black citizens going back more than a century?
Wonderful question, Cheryl. Let's go to Jan for this one.
Thanks so much, Cheryl. I really believe the role of mayor is very much about shining the light on these issues and inspiring people to get curious, to learn and understand and celebrate. For Canada's 150th birthday, the YWC, we went back into our history and just uncovered so many of these powerful stories that are inspiring. So I think it's really important that we share that. And it really is making this front and center to make sure that we are leaving no Calgarian behind, and how we also celebrate where we've come from. And this, when we look at sort of both, you know, sort of Black, racialized, Indigenous, we have histories too that we need to atone for. And how do we really come to look at from a very much a truth perspective, acknowledging this, and how we reconcile that, actually working together in a very meaningful way to build a common future where no one is left behind. So, and it's about inspiring and taking so much inspiration from these stories.
Thank you very much, Jen. Yeah, that was even inspiring. And Teddy, maybe you could answer the same question. You know, what are your how will you incorporate Black history into Calgary and the cultural fabric here?
John, thanks. You know, this Black History Month and Black Business Law, now I've gotten this every time. It's very emotional to me because I just don't want to be, on all the candidates, I think I'm the one, and I tell people respectfully how I feel. I don't want to be defined with my Blackness. I don't want to be defined. I want to have equal justice and fairness, access to everything like every other person do have in this city. I want everyone to know that we're all Calgarians. Supporting Black History Month, of course, is there. And I would highly recommend that the Black history, the Black community would push with provincial government on other issues in terms of making sure that it may not start today, having that conversation to have a curriculum, because Black people have contributed a lot in this great country, not just this city. So having that curriculum, as you see the fight now going on with the indigenous people, making sure we have the content as well in schools, curriculums, and as well in the universities. So I would highly recommend from that policy perspective that we engage the federal government as well, because they have jurisdictions over more than the municipal government to make sure it's provincial wide. You know, our children here understanding our history and all that, the contributions of Black people, so is other race in this great country. I haven't seen the white people celebrate White History Month, but I mean, they should as well have their own documented and not just in curriculum, so that we don't seem to be divisive, but rather being more inclusive and having a more diversified approach to it.
Thank you, Teddy, and thank you very much, Jen. You know, it's always interesting to hear perspectives on this kind of subject because you know, having seen Cheryl's wonderful, highly recommended documentary on John Ware, you know, it really does show you the role that Black people played in this province. But at the same time, we aren't really aware of it too much. I see, you know, there was, you know, a mountain named after him that was, you know, a little bit different than his name that has since been renamed, and you know, obviously, you know, the school at State. But this guy was a big piece of the fabric of Calgary and Alberta a long time ago. So I think it's important that we continue to recognize these people in the past. Now we are going to go over to Kenny with the next question. Kenny Ilchanu.
Hear me? John, you're frozen on me.
Yep.
Okay, awesome. Hi, John. Hi, Teddy. So I want to pivot away from the police question and the problems we have in downtown, for instance. I live in Northwest Calgary, and just close to my community here, there's Glacier Ice or Glacier something, another community that is being built out there. There's Carrington, there's Livingston. Calgary is expanding exponentially, and people are moving out to Airdrie just to get away from the sprawl or the houses. And sometimes you hear that city council is doing this just because they want to make money out of the land sales and everything. What's your opinion on the urban sprawl? Do you support it or not? And if you do, why? If you do not, why? Thank you.
There was a urban sprawl question, and then let's go to Teddy. You can answer first on this one. How will you address urban sprawl in Calgary?
From the get-go, to be frank and honest to the audience here, I've been against urban sprawl for so many reasons that I felt is not sustainable. But being on the campaign trail, talking to residents, white, black, brown, developers, and all that, we have had huge conversations there. We respect our conversations, my positions on it. But I've had a change of heart. And the change of heart, which I believe they have reflected that on the website, I've not checked today. The change of heart is that I'm looking at more supporting, advocating, and supporting sustainable communities. Sustainable communities in Calgary, we have got a lot to gain in supporting sustainable communities. The urban sprawl, I'm in support of that, if I have to use that term, if it's only that local developers here are the ones that's giving the access and being open to bid and get to execute those structures. Sometimes you have got a huge programs and structures that is only left for the elitists, and foreigners are doing that behind the scenes. So my support for sustainable communities, I support it. Urban sprawl, I will support it if there are only local developers that is doing that. Thanks.
And thank you very much for that, Teddy. And then let's go to Jen. What are your thoughts on urban sprawl? Should we keep on expanding out, or how you'll address it?
We have actually, in some sense, we've got a very archaic land use system, which it drives some of this sprawl and also prevents some what I'll call alternative use, or sort of multi-use sorts of homes in sort of more of the inner city. And so it almost seems to be we have to choose between sprawl or downtown densification. And I like to actually resurface, and what I'm committing to is actually some land use reform, that there is always choice. We do have an affordable housing challenge, despite the fact that we're one of the few cities in Canada where some can still purchase a single family home with a backyard. That actually is something that is an attraction to the city, that is unique relative to others. But also in the work that I've been doing, certainly with marginalized and vulnerable populations, both in United Way and my WCA, we also know that there is a huge affordability issue, particularly for single women in our city and others. So we've got to actually look at alternatives. And I think because we've gotten so polarized in this debate, densification all of a sudden is viewed as sort of an 8-story building. Something that you may not know, and this is something too, as I've been talking with people as well, is we often think of New York City, right, as the dense, and is that really what we're trying to create? And I know there's been some big challenges going on in Inglewood right now, and looking at that streetscape and what kind of development are going on. But you know that LA is denser in terms of its development than New York City? So it's not always about going up. I think it's about having choice and market and ensuring we've actually got the land and the incentives. And it also is not complicated to get changes in land use to actually put, sort of multi-buildings, townhomes, whatever it is. It also creates the vibrancy and the eclectic. It also protects a lot of our neighborhoods, and that we actually can welcome many people and different people from all walks of life, and very much too about how you settle in terms of both our elderly and how do we integrate them better into community. And that becomes an affordability, and we have to look at, it's not just about single-use family homes, which is often sort of the debate in this, and viewing that we have to go out further to make it affordable. So a bit of the vision I'm talking about is a really connected communities in our city, where we have strong, vibrant main streets, that we're investing in that main street. Love the idea of a 15-minute city, which is in terms of accessibility. Public transit's a big piece of this, that we've actually got choices in housing, choices in transit, that really kind of connects all of us. So I think that's sort of the way I want to tackle that problem, and hope that sort of maybe even gives you some things to think about. And we have to get out of the either or and look at the and how do we actually look at the city as a whole. And I also know that a world-class city always has a vibrant downtown and a vibrant cityscape, and we just don't have that right now. And I'm committed to helping to build that.
Beautiful. Thank you very much. And now your last little segment there, that was one of our questions tonight. How will we make Calgary a more vibrant downtown? However, we are now out of time, and I want to give you both an opportunity to share some closing thoughts. Now, to make sure it's fair, I have a loony here. Teddy, you're gonna be heads, and Jan, you are tails, and so Jan, you get to go up first with the closing remarks.
I am so grateful to have the opportunity here to listen, also because your questions are so telling and informs me as well as what is on your mind, the issues. I am sensing tremendous passion and belief in this city. That is something that we share. It's one of the reasons that I've thrown my hat into the arena. It is also to create a wave behind me, change the conversation. Are we talking about building a very inclusive, dynamic, vibrant city where there is opportunity for all? I so believe in a city that becomes a magnet, right, for people to live, work, and play. And are we making the right investments and getting away the barriers? We haven't talked a lot about local business, and this has been one of my reflections over COVID, is how important local economy is. And particularly as we see also newcomers coming to our city from all sorts of diverse areas and places in the planet. And this is, and I feel most comfortable when we have this eclectic, this diversity, and that where everyone is coming together to build this dynamic city. And I'm inviting you to support me in helping to create this vision. I am a collaborator. I am governed by servant leadership. I have a history through all of the work that I've done in the sector to pull diverse perspectives together, to get us working together, to inspire people, to get the best out of people so we can be the best we can be. So I hope that over the course of the next 4 months, we can continue to have this conversation. I want to hear what's on your mind. I want to hear what I am missing. What are my blind spots? And how do we build this city that becomes the place that we all aspire for it to be? Because I so believe in it. And I'm willing to step away from my job for 6 months to throw all of my energy and passion into this, to becoming the next mayor of this great city and to serve the people well. So thank you.
Jan, very well said. So just hold on, don't dip out. Let's hear what Teddy has to say now, and I would love to share just a few words after we're all done. Teddy, floor is yours.
I went into this race passionately believing that I'm more experienced in life. I've worked in every sector, oil and gas, consulted with governments at all levels in Africa, in Europe, and in North America, and with the global systems within the United Nations, World Bank, UNDP, UNICEF. So, and still consulting, but pandemic, it have slowed things down. I've been involved here in politics locally behind the scenes, very active with the Progressive Conservative. We are now called UCP here, and with the Federal Conservatives Party in Calgary. I mean, across the country. I'm very active, was on the board in my riding. I've owned a business here. I'm an entrepreneur, a development consultant. I have the experience to lead this city. And I went in here because I definitely believe we need a change at the city of Calgary, where so much work is going on, and we need to speak the truth to power. Citizens need to be engaged. So if you reach out to Teddy for campaign, if you want to be included, my campaign is all about inclusion and equity. And we all need to have a voice, everyone here. And as I said during this conversation, we are all privileged to be here. From First Nations to white settlers to everyone that have come by. We are all products of immigration, and that's what I stand by. We have to have respectful conversations about this. The system, we have got a very biased, some areas there is systematic racism in the system, or bias exists. We know that very well. And we're going to go all out or all in. We need to confront this with respectful conversations in council. And I just cannot wait during this pandemic, post-pandemic, to get the economy started. That's going to be a huge boost in diversifying and making sure that no one is left behind. Please join me on my campaign and reach out to the campaign. Thank you so much.
Teddy, very well said. So Jan and Teddy, and also without her being here, Jyoti as well, it gave us a wonderful presentation of their thoughts tonight. Special thanks to the Calgary Black Chambers board and the Quasi for helping us organize all the thoughts that we had to turn into questions. Special thanks to Brian and Warren on our advocacy council for really setting the tone for what we were trying to get accomplished tonight. We very much look forward to hosting other mayoral candidates on our speaker series, and we will actually be having our first in-person meeting coming up here on July 8th, coming up here in 2 weeks. So once again, thank you, Jan, and thank you, Teddy, for sharing your thoughts tonight. It gave us a lot to think about, and hopefully some of the questions that we asked, like you guys mentioned, might help guide your thinking a little bit as well. So thank you all for joining us tonight, and we look forward to seeing you in person and then at our next mayoral speaking series in 1 month's time. So thank you all, and have a great night. Thanks, Jen. Thanks, Teddy. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Heather.
Thanks.